Welcome back, my loves, to The Story Behind the Story. I'm Sierra Melcher of Red Thread Publishing. As you know, we always feature and invite female authors onto this podcast. We talk about writing, we talk about publishing, we talk about books and life and all things in between. We are joined today by one of the co-authors of The Anatomy of a Book, came out in November of last year, Danielle Perlin-Good. Hello, my darling. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Sierra. Thank you so much for having me today.
My pleasure. So I love collaborative books for a lot of reasons, and we can talk about that in a second. But you wrote a chapter for The Anatomy of a Book because you're a ghostwriter. But I love the story about your sort of timeline, because you were pregnant when you wrote this chapter. You wrote a chapter one day and gave birth the next day or the day after, correct?
Yes, that is correct, Sierra. I wrote this chapter, I believe it was a Saturday night, and the scheduled C-section was on Monday.
There you go. We were saying earlier before we hit record just how, having a baby, quite literally the act of having a baby or being a mother, doesn't necessarily slow any of us down. It just forces us to shape our lives a little bit differently, which is sort of what your chapter is about, right?
It really is. And I think that, my son is now 3.5, and I had my daughter now at this time of the recording about 5 months ago. And I really noticed just a lot of differences between the pregnancies, and also knowing that my mentality was different about work as well and about writing. And I really figured out after my son was born that I could have a family and I could expand my family, and I could also take invitations and say yes to them. And Sarah, I think you asked me if I would want to write this chapter, and I was, 7-8 months pregnant. And I said, yes, I will figure it out. And I did. And I'm really, really thankful for that.
Well, and I love what your chapter is about too, because so you're a ghostwriter, so you support people writing their books when sort of previously a lot of people come in and say like, I want to write a book, but I don't have the time and the energy because I'm running a business or being friggin' amazing in 9 million other ways. I have something that I want to share, but I don't. But those of us who are writers and have written and published know exactly how much time, energy, often money, and a lot of heart work goes into telling our own story. So I love that that's not the only way to get a story out into the world. Your chapter is called Choosing Freedom, and this idea that there's always a choice. And you were talking about that too, and just because you have a family and own and run a business or are, a C-level, C-suite executive doesn't mean you can't also do something big. Because there's lots of ways, and that's part. We do a lot of collaborative author books for the same reason. You want to become an author, you want to contribute to something, but maybe don't have all the time in the world, because we talk about books at Red Thread a lot like babies, that writing a whole book is like being pregnant and giving birth in all of its messy gloriousness and the joy and the exhaustion. It's very a similar process. And sometimes that's more than folks can handle, but collaborating, you were able to write your single chapter and the book just happened sort of without you after that. We put out a book yesterday with 19 women all becoming published authors by writing a 3,000 word chapter. And it's like getting to be a parent without the whole spectrum. It's taking a village to raise one child. It's like, well, contribute our little part.
It's like agreeing to babysit a child for like a week.
Yeah, it's auntie, right? We all get to be aunties of this baby without none of us have to do it all alone.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, I love everything you said is so true. And I always say, we have all different types of resources in our lives, right?
Mhm.
And we get to choose like what we do with those resources. So we get to
Yep.
choose what we fuel ourselves food wise and exercise wise for energy, right? And we also get to choose how we spend our time, and we get to choose how much money we invest
Yep.
in certain projects, right? And the women that I speak with, they have, for the most part, decided this is something I've always wanted to do. I have had this idea for 10 plus years in some
Right.
cases. And that idea is on the back burner. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners have that back burner list, right?
Oh my
Their back
gosh.
burner list of whatever it is, right? Whether it's writing a book, booking skydiving, what have you, right? And these women just have always wanted to write a book. And a lot of them didn't know that it was even possible to hire that out, to hire a ghostwriter and to spend money and just chat, right? Because my interview process is on Zoom, and I also Voxer with clients, and they didn't even realize that they could simply just show up and I would ask them questions and more questions and more questions. And then eventually a book would be created.
Well, it's
And
like a coaching session. It's a coaching relationship with you
yes,
creating a book of the process at the end, right? We get coaching.
yes,
And
exactly.
when I was rereading your chapter this morning, it was like, I mean, I am a writer, I am a publisher, but I was like, oh, I really want to have Danielle ask me all these questions and like tease out of me the story that I don't even know that's in there. Because when I sit down to write my own stuff, there's, my own process, my own obstacles that I put in place, etc.
Right, right.
And
And
that
it's
choice is super important.
absolutely, Sierra. And it's so hard to, especially with a lot of the women that I work with, when you go through something very traumatic as well, and you go through things that are just difficult to talk about. For example, I was talking to a client yesterday, and she had undergone breast cancer. I've actually talked
Yeah.
to several clients who have had breast cancer, and among many other things in her life that I won't get into all the nitty gritty details here. But the important thing is that she views this process almost as a form of therapy, she calls it, even though I'm
Absolutely.
not a trained therapist. But me asking those questions and asking, well, what happened in this instance, and really getting to know what happened so I can write about it. We talk about all sorts of things. And at some point, my goal is to be able to be in person with my clients for a week or so and be able to spend that time with them in person, because there's something that's you can't find that when you have that tangibility,
Absolutely.
and that's the goal eventually. But you can
Yeah.
still do a lot of wonderful work, and it's amazing. I have clients, international clients throughout the world, and being in a different time zone, it doesn't matter anymore. You can work with people, you can get a book out in a different time zone now, which is incredible, I think.
Yeah. I love that you brought this up too, because of everything in your chapter, I highlighted one sentence. Whether you're working with a ghostwriter or whether you're writing your own work, this is profoundly true. You say, if we're not being our vulnerable selves on the page, then our readers know, and they'll steer clear of our advice, our stories, anything that we're trying to deliver. And I know that this is so true. It's it's one of the hardest things, but it is both what you help people find. And I think this is why writing, whether with a ghostwriter or even on our own, it's such a profoundly healing and transformative process for the writer, if and when we're willing to go into those dark corners and finish the digesting of past experiences in order to share it so profoundly and truly on the page. otherwise, what the hell are we doing, right? If we're just sort
Right.
of telling the pretty picture, obviously we're going to miss really connecting with the reader and having that impact. So I love that you share that there, because even in our most recent collaborative project, where I'm hearing all of the stories, both the chapters that are written, but then the backstory of the what I had to go through in order to get to that point of being able to tell that story. Um, and and this is why I love this work too, is you do it with your clients in one way and we do it with our authors in another. But the point is to, as individuals, to get to the gems in the mess and dig through our stories, because that has the transformative healing power for us. And when we do that, it translates automatically into an impactful story for a reader, which is hopefully the whole point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's really something to be said about really utilizing this experience as a form of self-care almost, right? Because the authors that I've worked with, the women that I've worked with, they do become authors because of me,
Yeah.
but which
Yeah.
is fantastic, and it's something that they've always wanted. And I mean, I've had clients say to me, like, they've reconsidered very important parts of their life, their personal lives, based upon our conversations.
Mm.
I'm talking about whether or not somebody wants another kid, a divorce, a marriage, like very,
Yeah.
very personal things. And this all comes out of the work that we do together. And I truly believe in the quality of the work as well. And I think that's really important in this day and age, right, Sierra? Because I know you do as well. And I know that there are a lot of people that say, oh, you can, write a book in a weekend, a whole book, right? Now, I'm not talking about just a
Sure.
chapter.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
A whole
always
book.
say, yeah. And I always say, yes, like if somebody wants to do that themselves, but the process that I do with my clients, it really makes them think even further about the very small details. So I'm talking about, what somebody wore to the hospital when they were having a double mastectomy, right? Like, why did they choose that? What did they wear afterwards, right? What is the significance of that? What is the significance of who went with them and what their relationship was, right? And there's a lot to unpack in just that instance, right? And I think this goes back to, if we write ourselves, if we don't have an editor, if we don't have somebody else, a coach, a ghostwriter, right, then we don't get
Should
to the
never
meat.
not have the editor, right? You've got to have somebody else,
Yes.
whether it is the
Yes.
coach or a ghostwriter or beta readers, and then the editor.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
we don't know our own stories. We can write our own stories, but we're too in it to properly tell the story in a way that we can benefit from. And especially, we need that outside perspective to know, to really think about the reader too, because it's not
Absolutely.
just
And now what I
us
do
for
too.
ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No, no, go for it.
but I really love the idea too. And now what I do in my packages is when I work with somebody on a ghostwriting level, it includes one round of developmental editing now by somebody else, by an editor who I trust.
Right.
And I think that's so critical because we do need a few eyes on the manuscript. Like, think about what traditional publishing goes through, right? If you have a book that's at one of the big 5 houses, they go through tons and tons of rounds of editing in all different categories, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's really, really critical to also know that the process is long because the quality matters. And I've had a lot of people say, can I just publish this book, right? And I'm sure you have too. Can I just get this out?
Yeah,
Can I just do this?
sure. Anyone
And
listening can publish a PDF on Amazon this afternoon if they want to. I don't
exactly.
recommend it
You
for a
know what I
million
always say?
reasons, but go
I
ahead.
say my 3.5-year-old son can write his name or the first initial, and I can take a picture. I can upload that to Amazon, and that can be a book
Yep.
today if I really wanted to.
You could even, and you can tweak it so that it's a bestseller,
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. But is that what you want in the world for
Right.
your legacy? Right? That's what I love to ask.
And I love the questions that you included in your chapter, because I think they serve everybody. It's like, why are you writing this book? What does success of this story and this book look like? But then you also ask this question of like, what happens if you don't? What happens when you live a beautiful life and it's not written down? And
Yeah.
oh, that question sort of kicked me in the gut, because we work with women all the time who, up until they meet us, like a lot of your clients, have been hankering for this. I want to tell my story. I don't know how. I don't know if I can. And they're running that risk of maybe never getting it told. And there's so many obstacles and fears and doubts, logistical and emotional, that get in the way. The reason we're an all-female publishing company is to really support women through this process, to get their stories told, to have that change for themselves, but to change the cultural conversation, and to let more women's voices get heard, because it makes a difference.
Yes. And I can't tell you, Sarah, how many times I have spoken with women on coffee chats that say, I don't even know if my idea is valid. The idea of validity in and you know, it goes back to society, it goes back to generational, and just ensuring now
Does my
that,
story matter? Right.
right, your story does matter, it is valid, right?
Yeah.
And for anybody listening, your story is valid. Yes, every story matters. Yes, on that letterboard. And it's true. It's true. It's just the packaging, right? It's the packaging, and it's how it's being told to resonate with your target audience. And that is the beauty of craft, right? And not all of the authors who I work with, these C-suite executives, they don't have time to learn how to craft a book.
No.
They don't have time to learn how to write. I know of lots of folks who are coaches and other people who want to learn that. And I do have, lots of wonderful referrals for them for programs they can go to that, deal with book coaching, and they can learn the craft themselves. But if you're listening and you say to yourself, gosh, I don't know if my idea is valid. I don't know if my idea is worthy. I don't have time to do a lot with this idea, but I want this written down and I don't know how to do it, then those are the questions that I get. And that's when working with me comes to fruition.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of, I keep sensing a really old sort of story, one that maybe nobody ever said, but we've all learned that we sort of have to do it alone. And if we're going to, and to be really successful, you have to have done it alone. That sort of like wander out into the wilderness and cross the continent, and and only then is it worthy. And I call full on BS on that, because that's what's kept so many people silent and not telling their stories. But it doesn't have to be done alone. First of all, no book ever is, right? Open up any book on your bookshelf, and there's a page of acknowledgments with like 35 to 100 people who helped make that book possible. So every single book is a small village already. So the story is BS. And one of the things I'm still learning is asking for help with my daughter, asking for help in my business, asking for help in a myriad of ways. And when we do that, people are lining up. They're like, I'd love to help you. I'd love to support. I'd love to contribute.
Yes.
And that's changing the whole story about how things are made and what the experience is. We're having more fun because we're doing it together. It's easier because we're not doing it alone. We're not taking on huge things all by ourselves. And the doubts shrink proportionally. It's like, I got all this help. And so I'm not actually responsible for, even like your clients, deciding whether it's valid or not. I'm going to tell Danielle, and she's going to help shape it so that it meets the need of the people who need it and the author herself. So I love this.
Oh my gosh, Sarah, I have just had probably 5 million thoughts pop in my head as you were talking. And I think it's so important for all women to learn what it means to ask for help in the way that feels good to them. And it's it's hard though, right? It's hard
Totally.
because a lot of us also watched our parents, like, and our moms and grandmas and other women and other generations not necessarily asking for everything that they needed. And now we have this opportunity, right? Like, for example, this is a little off off subject, but I think it's really important to know, like, in our generation now, like, there are women who are choosing to not have children, or choosing to not be married, or choosing to be married and not have kids. And this is the first generation where women kind of have that choice. And this is also a generation where we have so much technology that there are so many women, and including both of us, right, who work and also have young kids. And I think that it's just incredible that we have this opportunity, right? There's this opportunity that's there right now. And rather than saying, I can't, and then get to I won't, I want everybody to consider, what does it mean to say I can, and what do you need to accomplish those goals, right? What support system do you need? Who do you need in your life to make your reality, like, to make your dream reality an actual reality, right? And it's not just a pipe dream, right? It can actually happen.
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I want to draw attention to is that choice isn't, in this day and age, choice isn't an either or. It's not, I need a family or I need a job. I need to, earn money or write my book. I need to raise my kids, or it's not the either or. And I know that that's not what you're saying in your chapter at all. It's just the choosing of the how, right?
Yes.
I love writing in books, especially ones that I've made. And so in the margins of yours, it was like the choice between choosing limitation or choosing to see opportunity. And so it's not just the choice of what we eat, but it's the choice of how we approach the choices and say,
Yeah.
like, let's make this possible. How do we make that
Right.
possible instead of this or that?
Right.
And that shift is huge.
Yeah. And the women who I work with, they have that philosophy, and they know that they don't have to choose. And that, and here's the little caveat here. A lot of these female C-suite executives don't necessarily know all of their choices. They don't necessarily know that ghostwriting is a choice, that that hybrid publishing is a choice, that being a part of a book and a chapter is a choice, right? So it's almost the idea that we want more women to understand that their choices go beyond what they even considered.
Right. There's so many more opportunities than we're even aware of.
Yeah.
And that so much is possible. I love it. If you haven't had a chance to pick up The Anatomy of a Book, it's out in paperback and ebook. There are a bunch of amazing stories in here. I pulled together 20 people I knew in the book writing and publishing and marketing industry to give you a sense of actually what is possible. It is sort of a broad stroke of what are all the different ways to explore getting your story into the world and then have a successful book. I love your contribution to this because it goes beyond, what either of us do. And it's this bigger, how do we show up in our lives and craft our lives to the fullest? And I think that underlying question is so profound. So I wanted to thank you for it. Thank you for writing this book just before you gave a baby into the world.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy I said yes to this invitation. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. As always, we show up here every week speaking with women who are writers, who are in the industry, who have either just released or are in the process of writing a book. If you are looking to get your story into the world one way or another, follow, subscribe, check us out, reach out to Danielle if you want some real full-on support and have it more done for you. Reach out to me if you are in the process of putting pen to paper and you want to figure out, how do we do that? How do we craft a book, whether it's a solo book or a collaborative author book? Can't wait to see you here again next time. And thanks again, Danielle. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Sierra.